So we're going to do this intro different ways. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to do first the Ed McMahon version. Welcome to Oh Brother, Not Another Podcast with me, Trace Burrows.
And me, Miggs Burrows, presented by the newly transformed and fantastic Westport Library.
And now I'm going to do the NPR version.
Okay.
Welcome to Oh Brother, Not Another Podcast with me, Trace Burrows. And take it away, Miggs.
Oh, I'm sorry. And me, Miggs Burrows, presented by the newly transformed and fantastic Westport Library. Our first guest is Dan. Well, this is the burning issue of is it Wogue, Woog, Wowogue? What? No.
You know
Let's
what?
Get this cleared up once and for all.
I know it's an issue. It's Wogue. It's Dutch. However, I mispronounce my own name, so I don't worry about it. You can call me whatever you want.
I haven't, but I've had this discussion with people, and I correct them because I've heard you introduce yourself as Wogue, and there's the Moog. Everyone called it the Moog synthesizer, and it's really the Moog synthesizer, right?
And our president of the United States was Franklin Roosevelt.
Oh.
Dutch, also Dutch.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, great. So, you're the Westport, the conduit for all things Westport. I guess the first question I have is, what's going on with Westport?
The question that's been asked since the 1700s. It's just, as you guys know, it's an amazing town. There's so much going on. Some of it is good, some of it's bad, some of it's weird, some of it's cool, some of it's funky, some of it's bizarre. But, I think that's been the Westport of down through the centuries, and that's what's made it different, I think, from a lot of the nearby towns that might look the same.
What's the weird stuff?
Oh my God! Just walk out the door. You walk out of the library here and you see, Tiffany next to a homeless shelter.
Oh right! Oh yes, that is right. Yeah.
It's that's Westport. I mean, it's progressive. It's forward-looking. It's insular. It's provincial. It's open to the world and. We don't want anybody else coming in and telling us what to do. You walk down Main Street and you see these storefronts that have been empty for a year, with absentee landlords paying God knows what kind of taxes on them. And then you see a Savvy and Grace or a place like that's pretty cool and a throwback to the old Main Street, and it's we think this town doesn't change much, and yet there's something going on all the time.
And what do you think? Is this a new thing? This phenomenon? It's not. Maybe is it a phenomenon, or is it just you're paying more attention? We all are. Is the lack of civility, courtesy? The parking, the ridiculous parking situation, people in a Maserati rolling down their window and throwing garbage out the window on the street. I mean, is that new, or is we're just paying attention to it?
The three of us have been here. Yeah. We've grown up here. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that when you talk to people, they will talk about the golden age of when they moved here and how it was different, and that's true of the people who moved here in 1940 or 1960, and I heard the other day from a woman who moved here in the early 2000s, and she talked about how different the town was. The mom and pops on Main Street, as if Ann Taylor was
was the last mom and pop.
So I think we all have our lens of looking at it. Having said that, I don't remember the garbage on Parker Harding Plaza. I don't remember people being so rude. in terms of the driving. It's the Maseratis now.
Yeah, the driving.
Was it the Porsches and the BMWs when those were the hot cars? I don't know, but it's pretty gross.
So the other burning question I have to ask is, did you coin the phrase ass hat? I think that is the greatest word.
I
on television.
did not, but the definition is someone whose head is so far up their ass. That's sort of the etymology of it.
That's been out there. I used to hear that in sitcoms and.
Oh, have you? Okay. Well, first time I was in Dan's column. Here's an example of another ass hat.
I wish I had.
But yeah, well, that's a great. So you're a coach as well as you've been coaching soccer for how many years now? 30?
This will be my 17th year as the head coach of the boys soccer program at Staples. I was an assistant long before that, and I really started when I got back from college in the mid 70s, and Albie Leffler, my mentor.
Oh, yeah, he was there when I was there. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful guy. Sort of got me involved, and it's been a great trip ever since.
And what's the appeal? I mean, for you, soccer over many other sports, because it was basically an international kind of sport.
Yeah, it's Westport as a pioneer in so many ways was really a pioneer in suburban soccer. It did through much of the 20th century, it was an urban ethnic sport. You had the Polish teams in New Britain and Hartford. You had the Italians in Bridgeport. You had the Ukrainians, and Albie was really the first to bring the sport that he had played growing up outside of Hartford into suburbia. It wasn't the first, but he really jump-started it in this area. And the Staples teams of the 60s and 70s were really, really good. I mean, Albie made great teams. And we would travel and we would play these ethnic teams. We would go to New Jersey. We'd go to, the cities in Connecticut. And it was a way really for me to see the world. I mean, it sounds, hokey, but it really was. So the appeal of the game to me is that it's not football. It's not basketball. It's not baseball. It's a uniquely international sport. And you can play it, no matter what your size is. I am no giant by any means. But I could play it. You have to be, 7'9" to play basketball. You have to be 400 pounds to play football. And I think also that soccer players realize that they are part of this larger world. It's a welcoming sport for anybody. No matter what their race or their background. It's a very interesting sport. And the other thing I'll mention is that it does not, it's a player's sport. You can't call timeout. You can't diagram a play. You can't impose yourself as a coach on the game. Once the whistle blows, the players are on their own. And I really like that as a coach because my job is done when the game begins, and it appeals to very creative, intelligent people, which I kind of like.
So as a coach, you're responsible for raising their skill level, right? And just getting them prepared for the game.
Preparing them, exposing them to different situations that they will have where they have to figure it out on their own. The guys who were coaching with me, two great guys, Kurt Dasbach and Tom Henske, and we really are sort of the anti-coaches. We give a lot to the players. We demand a lot of them. And I think we're doing it in a way that a lot of other sports are not. So we have a good time doing it. We laugh a lot, and hopefully the kids do too.
And you were in a soccer movie, weren't you?
I was in Manny's Orphans.
Manny's Orphans, right.
You remember, I'm sure, Sean Cunningham.
Yeah, did bluer movies than that. But yeah. But yeah.
Sean, for those who don't know,
I don't know. He has sisters, though. No?
Well, Sean, he had a brother, Kevin Cunningham, who's still around, is a painter.
Kevin's still around.
But Sean invented Friday. He did the first Friday the 13th movie.
He did the first Friday the 13th. He did Spring Break. But before that, he was into porn.
Yeah, Marilyn, I think.
Is that where Marilyn got her?
I think so.
He was not involved with Marilyn.
Oh, wasn't?
Marilyn Chambers. But in the mid-'70s, he came up with this. First, he did a movie called Here Come the Tigers, which was a complete rip-off of Bad News Bears. The baseball, kids movie. And then he did a soccer movie called Manny's Orphans. And he hired me as the soccer guru. So my job was to sort of choreograph all the scenes with the orphans, who of course beat the prep school, GFA, Greens Farms Academy type kids in the big game. Surprise, surprise.
And these are all actors playing?
No, they were kids.
Real soccer?
Yeah, there were a couple of actors, but mainly it was our kids I was coaching. So I had to choreograph them to look bad and to play poorly in the beginning. And they couldn't do it because they thought that this was going to be their big break and they would be discovered by Hollywood. So they couldn't play poorly. And I remember the first thing, Sean was a director and I was I knew nothing about movies. And we went to Bridgeport where we did some of the filming. And he asked me to work with the production guys to set out a soccer field. So we had this grass area, and I set out a soccer field. And other things were going on, and Sean came out of the trailer, and he said, "What's this?" I said, "It's the soccer field." He said, "It's too fucking big." I said, "Well, Sean, you didn't tell me." So we, made it a little smaller. It was just a great time. They had this, the Panavision was new. It was the camera that's held on the cameraman's shoulders, and it's spring-loaded, so he can run... Steadicam. So he could run amidst the, all the action and take the action while he's running against it. So the kids that I got, they're 12 and 13 years old, and they started inventing a game which was to see how close they could come to kick the ball to the, $6,000 camera without breaking it. So Sean calls a halt to the action. He gets these 12-year-old kids around him. He says, "What the fuck is going on?" And they looked at him. He says, "If any of you break this camera, you're buying it." So it was just a great time, and the movie, I think, was the first movie to ever actually open in airplanes. It bypassed theaters.
It went straight to
straight
30,000 feet.
Right. But the funny thing is, it's still getting airtime.
Really?
On channel 592 at 4 a.m. And a kid will come up to me, and I had a role in it as the referee. So I'm there with, it's the mid-'70s. I have long hair, and the camera zooms in on me, and I blow the whistle, and the game starts. I'm on screen for 3 nanoseconds, and these kids will come up to me in 2019 and say, "Dan, I saw your movie." I said, "What are you doing watching, channel 592 at 4 a.m?
Did you have to join SAG and after for that?
I did not, but I did get a credit, and I am on IMDb.
Oh, are you really? You have your own page?
Do you still get royalties?
Did
you ever get royalties?
No royalties. I got an appearance fee. But these kids at Staples, Staples players who've acted in, 20 shows, and they're great, and they're going to, Carnegie Mellon or wherever, and they're becoming actors, are really pissed off at me that I have an IMDb page.
That's great. Yeah. Well, speaking of Staples and all that, you've been there well, we both graduated Staples. How has that changed? I mean, from my perspective, when I was there, let's see, my first year in high school was in the old Staples building that was on the Bedford. I get the name.
Now it's Saugatuck.
Saugatuck. I didn't realize you started there.
Oh yeah, so I was actually in the original Staples High School building, which was that ancient-looking brick building. So I had my first class was in there. We were waiting for Staples to be finished. And so I wasn't in the first year of the new Staples, but I think the second year we transferred over. And so it's 5 buildings, set in a California layout.
Yeah.
And it's raining. You had to run between classes.
I liked it, yeah.
You liked it?
Well, you got to go outside, because you're inside, so you got a little outdoor.
That's true.
From your classroom, you got to walk it out.
And actually at lunchtime, Barry, he was the Schemers then, but Barry Tashin, who became Barry in the Remains and on, used to play at lunchtime with Schemers, played out there at lunchtime. Richard Delvecchio and I think Michael Friedman was in the Schemers. And so at lunchtime we had a band playing in the... But anyway, so what your...
So I was a few years after you. One of my great regrets is I was never in that original Staples building on Riverside Avenue, which is now basically where the Saugatuck L Auditorium is.
Well, the original building has been torn down.
Right.
Yeah, right. But that's where it was.
That's where it was.
Exactly, the auditorium.
And I saw it. I was young, I'm a few years younger than you, but I never was in that building which is really too bad. So I was at Staples when it was still, at this point, 9 separate buildings, still had the covered walkways, fantastic in September and October and May and June, and pretty ridiculous the rest of the year.
Running for your life.
But, you're right, Trace. We were outside. We would go out between classes. There was life in the courtyard. I was there when it was an open campus. We had 2,000 kids in 3 grades.
We had 1,200.
You had 1,200, yeah. I mean, and they needed us off campus because it was too crowded. So we would go, we would get lunch. They had a student lounge when I was there, which was sort of underneath the 9 building. And it blows my mind when I think about it, but there were no teachers allowed in there. So everything you can imagine that would have gone on, went on there. And we just thought it was normal. Yeah, we have a student lounge and, no teachers.
That's amazing.
And then, they had the renovation, they called it, where they sort of bricked in all the 9 different buildings and turned it into one. And now and that lasted for another 30 or so years. Then they did this, great $84 million reconstruction project.
The way it is now.
The way it is now. And I had this idea that, they would bring in a ball and chain and knock it down and build a new school. But they actually nibbled away at it to, save all the steel and asbestos and everything else that was there. And they built the new school while the old school was still there. So we would go, as I work there now, and we would go from this beautiful, gleaming, airy building to the old, moldy, low-ceiling, gross one, and yet it had its charm. The new building works. It's gorgeous. It's already 12 years old and it still looks, fresh and new. It's just a fantastic building, and yet it's 3 stories. You don't have that.
The outside of it, when I've seen it, when I first now 10 years ago, it seemed so cold and small windows.
Like a corporate
very
headquarters.
institutional.
Yeah, it was compared to corporate headquarters, airline terminal, prison. But it really works. Now there's art on the walls. The trees have grown up in the courtyard. It's really much nicer now. And the auditorium, which used to be a separate building with steps that you had to climb to get into it, is now fully integrated into the school. You know, kids hang out there all the time.
So they use the same auditorium that was like when we were growing up.
But it's become an integral part of the school the way it always was.
Right.
Emotionally and spiritually, and now physically, it's the center of the school.
And it's much enhanced as a space. But I was in Staples Players, and the second year it was created by Matheson and Steve Gilbert, and that was basically the same. It's the same space.
Yeah,
that's the only remaining.
That's nice.
Intact space from the previous Staples.
So here's the interesting thing. Every couple of years, I will give a guided tour of the new Staples to reunion classes, and they're blown away by the building. They love the TV studio and the culinary. They're like commercial kitchens, but we always end up on at the auditorium, and they will, members of the class of 76 or 66 or 56. Well, not 56 because they weren't there, but they will get up on that stage and they'll start, saying lines from their play.
Oh, wow.
John Gilmore was there once and started singing. So it's, to go back to your question, Miggs, the building has changed significantly, but it's still, I think, in many ways, Staples High School. And that's not going to change.
No. Yeah, and to plug you mentioned the art, but just to give them a little plug, the Westport Permanent Art Collection, which has the biggest municipal art collection in the country, and they rotate art, and it's in all the schools and municipal buildings, but they've done a fantastic job. There's art in all the kids are exposed to some great art, some local art. I mean, Trace and I are both in that collection. I don't know where our art is necessarily, but it's just a great thing. The kids, they can pass a Picasso and a Calder and a Burroughs or wherever they're going,
and Rick von Schmidt's.
The beautiful, yes.
And Robert Lambden's mural. It's
so it's phenomenal. So another thing I think you initiated was the Gay Straight Alliance. Was that you created that in 1995?
I did before that. Early 90s. It was the first Gay Straight Alliance in a public school in Connecticut. Choate had one, but they don't count. And it was, and it's still going strong. I'm not associated with it any longer. But it was really a place where kids could be themselves and talk about issues. The straight part of it is really important too. The part of straight allies as part of the LGBT community. And now, when I came out and it was sort of the first at any public school anywhere, and particularly as a coach, now there are, I wouldn't say dozens, but there's certainly a number of openly gay staff members and students, several trans students, and it's it's part of Staples. I mean, it's just it's a non-issue.
And so, have you seen progress in terms of tolerance and general, school student relationships and things? Has it made a big difference?
It's still, you'll still hear that's so gay and don't be a fag, but it's but when you hear it, sometimes a kid will say, why are you saying that? Don't be an idiot.
Yeah.
And Westport and Staples in particular have a reputation of sort of being, very homogeneous and not a lot of diversity. There certainly is the diversity in terms of sexuality, but there's also other kinds of diversity that you may not see on the surface. There's certainly not a lot of people of color, though more than people realize. The A Better Chance program is fantastic. There's also another program that brings kids from Bridgeport in. But the diversity that nobody really sees is in terms of global. A couple of years ago, I was thinking about our soccer team, and at that point we had 66 players on the team, and I counted 33 of them, so exactly half had parents who were born outside the U.S. And it was all over, Egypt, Israel, South Africa, Philippines, Norway, Uruguay. And, obviously many of them were business people, and so you don't have the socioeconomic diversity, but you really do have much more than we used to, diversity of places of origin. And you don't see that walking down the halls.
Right. Yeah. Hunter, we had one black kid.
We had one black kid.
Did you?
Barry Johnson, I think. One black kid and the whole 1,200 kids.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, we had, this sounds terrible. The black kid in our class was his name was Sam Pear, I remember. Handsome kid, great student.
And you know what? Sam, when we have soccer reunions, Sam always comes.
Oh, really? Oh,
yes.
Seriously? Okay.
He feels very much a part of what we did.
How great
Lives
is
up
that?
in the Hartford area.
That's great. You know what he's doing in terms of his livelihood? Or?
I'm sure he's retired.
Actually, I think I know. Isn't that weird? We should all be retired. So we got a few minutes left. I'm just curious, since you're got your ears and nose and everything on the Westport Pulse. What are your readers? What do you think are the concerns of Westporters now seem to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. We can get caught up in sort of the issue of the day, whether it's the Osprey or or whatever. To me, I think there's a couple of issues that are really important that sometimes get talked about and sometimes don't. One is the fact that the affordable housing and the issues over housing are here to stay. People don't yet realize how many projects have already been built. And by projects, I don't mean that negatively. I mean how much construction has been done and is really in the pipeline, and how that's going to sort of change the town by bringing in either single people or just new residents. And we're going to continue to talk about housing and affordable housing for a long time. And the other issue is what all these new families are doing positively, I think positively in the town. There's a ton of new families in town. I think there's a law passed, I missed it, but you have to move here from Manhattan or Brooklyn. That's where they're all coming from. They're coming with young kids. They themselves are fairly young. They're in their 30s or early 40s. They have their own idea of why they moved here and what they moved here for and what they're going to get involved in. They're smart. They're energetic. They work really hard. They are parenting their kids differently than we were parented, and even the parents of 20 years ago. As their kids move through the school system and as they try to figure out what happens with Coleytown and middle school and all that, it's going to be a big impact on the town. I have no idea how or how it's going to play out. But, it's sort of like when our parents moved here and in the post-war era, and I'm sure the people who lived here then were saying what's happening to our town, and I think we turned out pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it.
Miggs, Trace, fantastic.